All right, so you know what the weapons are, you know what they look like. So now, without further ado, we'll bring on Avi. All right, so we're joined here today by Avi from Rebel News. Avi, welcome to the show. And to get started, mate, it was a really hectic weekend, particularly on Saturday. So you were there, you were caught up right in the middle of it. You experienced the pepper balls fired from Victoria Police, perhaps for the first time we've seen them in protest. Mate, could you just tell us a little bit about your experience that day?
Yeah, listen, I'm somebody that has, if you've been following me for a good few years now, you'll know that I've pretty much made it my thing to be at as many protests as possible, no matter the issue, whether it's something I support or I'm against. I like to be there. And in my time, in the years that I've covered protests in Melbourne, I have never, ever, not once witnessed the police using rubber bullets against them, using tear gas, pepper spray. We have seen, but not to the extent that we saw this Saturday. And it was absolutely uncalled for. It was, you know, when people talk about the violence from the protesters, I think if police stood back and let the protesters just voice their concerns, you wouldn't see any of that anger. You wouldn't see any of the violence from the protesters. And I'm not condoning any violence from protesters. I think, um, there are some people that have feel like they have no way out and are getting violent towards police, especially when police create that line. And I think that's where we saw it most, is when police tried to box them in again. And this is just to put perspective into people's minds who are sitting at home and easily judging the situation. Is Victorians that have gone to these protests have experienced being boxed in what we call a controversial tactic known as kettling. And when they start to feel that, they realize, well, if we get trapped behind this line, we can easily, whether they're right or wrong, we can easily find ourselves in that position. And that line that was broken, where people are talking about the violence, it was in the exact same position where people had previously been kettled. I've reported there, and they've been trapped for hours without water, then fined for being there, picked off one by one for being there. So it's easy to sit at home and judge people for getting violent. And I'm not defending. There are certainly some people that go to these protests that are not good people. There are. Trust me, watch Rebel News in the next couple of days. You'll see. And they're the ones that the media, the mainstream media, like to focus on. But they don't represent the majority there. The majority is so diverse. I could not give you one person, a single person that represents the anti-lockdown or whatever, the protesters there on Saturday. There was a great photo that I actually saw, which I think captures it all. It's where you saw, one, ethnic woman with a sign just open the playgrounds with pushing a pram with a kid with a white guy behind. It was literally the symbol of diversity, something they like to claim this state is all about.
Absolutely, and that's why many people, thousands of people, are very grateful for your work, Avi, because you tell a side of the story that is either otherwise not told by the mainstream media or told but in a very deceptive way, and often with an agenda that is designed to paint people who are protesting against lockdowns as some type of unhinged mob, which you and I know from first-hand experience is so far from the truth. Now, when I watched your footage, I saw some pellets fired towards you and it released some type of capsicum spray. That's what I believe it was after I went and looked into that particular weapon. Now, at the time, Avi, this was at the start of your report. There was not a big crowd. People were not yelling. People were not throwing anything at police. Police fired, just opened fire, it seemed completely unprompted, and towards you, and you were standing basically in front of your camera guy. Walk us through that. What the hell happened?
It was actually very close to, I think, the market, and the protesters were walking the other way. They were marching through towards the markets. There was no one going towards police. So it was absolutely unprovoked. The only people left there really was a handful of journalists and a few stragglers from the protesters, but there was no threat on police. It was unarmed civilians and media. And that was tear gas. It was tear gas being used on really media.
Before we wrap it up, Avi, what is the best way for people to follow you?
Listen, I tell people these days, sign up to YeminiReport.com because that's the one platform they can't take away. So give me your name and email. The important reports, we send each and every one through to your email. But for now, while I'm still around, you know, I'm on Twitter, I'm on YouTube. I got a retweet today from Joe Rogan, who is sharing what's happening here in Melbourne. The world is watching. That's the thing. The world is actually watching what is happening here. It's been, I think, 48 hours, and Australia has fallen, is trending around the world. So the world is watching, and if you want to follow the work that we do at Rebel News, rebelnews.com.au, we're actually signing up a bunch of reporters. This week was the first weekend that we had reporters in Brisbane and Sydney. So we're trying to get the whole country, you know, it's hard because I've been following what's happening here in Melbourne, and I've been on the ground in Melbourne, but we know that there are people around the country struggling, and we need more people doing what you're doing, Morgan.
Thank you very much, Avi. Well,
So
Avi, you're doing a tremendous job. You've come so far. I've known you, well, for a long time, since we were teenagers. I've seen you grow.
Yeah, we're going to start.
And I just want to say that on behalf of thousands of people around Australia and around the world, we appreciate your work. You're telling a side of the story that is otherwise, as I said, not just ignored by the mainstream media, but completely misinterpreted, or not even misinterpreted. Protesters are slandered in order for the media to play along with the line of the government. That's not what we do. We challenge them. Keep up the good work. And for everybody watching at home, I've put the links to Avi's channels in the link of this video.
Thank you, mate. And I'm sure everything you just said in that outro, we can throw right back at you, brother. Thank you.
Awesome, mate. All right, have a good one. I'll chat to you soon. All right, so once again, that was Avi there from Rebel News. Avi, thanks for coming on the show. If you'd like to stay up to date with Avi and the work that he's doing, just head on over to YeminiReport.com. You can subscribe to his newsletter and make sure that you do not miss out on an episode.